let's talk about decision making, okay? Because I feel like a lot of times people very much struggle with this, especially a lot of business leaders and a lot of law firm owners. And when I say decision making, okay, let's think about this, right? So I've long since said that indecisiveness is weakness, for the reason that when you postpone a decision, you're actually making a decision to postpone that, right? And then the value of speed in a business, right? The decisions, if you're able to make swift decisions, take decisive action, you can move a lot faster. You could actually be wrong and make a lot of wrong decisions and get to the right one faster than somebody who's spending all that time agonizing over one decision. By that point, somebody who makes decisions swiftly has made 10. But let's get back to an actual framework around making decisions, because I feel like a lot of times people don't have them. Either decisions based on emotion, so how one's feeling at a given time, or it's based on, let's say, information or a lack of information. So the first thing I would say is that, do you have enough information to make a decision, and does getting more information help you make a better or different decision? Because at some point, once you get 80% of the information, if you're going to spend another 6 months to get the additional 20, right, that doesn't necessarily help you get, the additional information necessary to make a decision. Sometimes we simply have enough, okay? The other way to weigh it is to look at it from the standpoint of an equation, okay? So you look at what is your upside of making the right decision and what is your downside of making the wrong decision, right? If your downside of making the wrong decision is ever that it wipes out your business, that's definitely a decision that does not make sense, okay? But let's just say you got your upside of being right, your downside of being wrong. Now, let's add in, what is your probability of being right and what is your probability of being wrong? And if you multiply the upside of making the right decision, like what you stand to gain, times the probability of being right, and you subtract that from the downside of being wrong times the probability of being wrong, right? If that's a positive number, then chances are it's still, the upside is way greater than the downside, and your probability, it makes sense to say yes, okay? And when you can do this enough times, you start to actually think about this in a lot of different ways. So meaning that sometimes if you're having to make a decision where you're speaking to a vendor, contractor, business, or whatever it is, and you want to ask if you can get X, Y, and Z, some bonus or whatever it is, right? Your downside of being wrong, right, is them just saying nope. Your upside is that you get that extra thing, okay? Something like that has very low downside. It makes sense to just ask, right? When in doubt, just ask. It never hurts. Now, let's look at something else like cancer, okay? Like this is like a dark topic, right? So you're like, in terms of getting a cancer screening, right? So meaning that your downside of, let's say, not getting one and finding out you have cancer is significant, right? Your upside of, let's say, like not getting the screening and finding out you don't have cancer is fairly low. So it almost always makes sense when the downside is great enough, right, that you proceed and make sure that you can help to mitigate that. So long story short, it's important to have a framework around the ways in which you can make decisions, and it's important to be able to make those decisions swiftly. And you also have to consider the factor of time in making decisions. So sometimes does waiting longer actually hurt the outcome or actually prevent you from making that outcome? Let's say you're trying to buy a piece of real estate and you know that if you take too long of this decision, that opportunity is gone, right? So time now plays a role. Are you like actually, let's say emotionally, how are you feeling, right? Maybe you haven't gotten enough rest. Maybe you haven't gotten enough sleep. It's important to be mindful of like where you are in the sense of, are you able to make decisions with a clear head and a clear frame of mind? But most importantly, I will say this. The biggest barrier I feel to a lot of people is they're simply unwilling to make a decision. It's not either a yes or a no. They just don't have a framework for evaluating it, and they don't have the headspace for it or whatever it is, and they think that there's some other barrier or some additional information they need to make the right decision, when in reality what that creates is slugs, right? Basically, it just slows you down. It slows down your whole business. Maybe you need to ask 3 different people who may have different pieces of, like, let's say, perspectives. And then even from that standpoint, they need additional information. So what could be a decision you make in 10 minutes turns to a decision that takes 10 months. And now you multiply that times all the types of decisions you got to make in your business, and imagine how slowly things move, okay? So you have to evaluate that, because businesses have to be able to be nimble. If your goal is to grow and to be able to move swiftly, you've got to have a great decision-making framework. So I'll probably vlog on this some more, because this is a topic that I'm especially passionate about. But remember, when in doubt, indecisiveness is weakness.